All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good to see you guys. Kevin here at church at Thrive Vineyard. It is August 11th, kind of a pretty day out there after the storms of yesterday. I hope you guys made it through relatively unscathed. Mal and I, we were kind of amazed at the power of the storm yesterday, and we actually had a huge chunk of our tree in the backyard come down. So we're gonna have to figure out how to get that thing down. And we lost part of our fence. So not lost it, but it blew over. So somebody handy is going to have to come and fix that. But at any rate, we're doing just fine. That we made it through okay. Hope you guys are as well. And so I didn't really know what I was going to be sharing with you guys this morning, but I'm actually feeling edified by what the Lord was kind of directing me towards today. And interestingly, I'm going to talk about something that's like super kind of archaic and unfamiliar to us in sort of the picture of it. So I'll have to explain a little bit of it, but it's incredibly liberating, incredibly powerful. So I pray that that every person that hears this would take it to heart and really receive what Jesus wants to give to you through this, because he has an incredible gift for each of us. And so what I'm going to be talking about, what I want to talk to you guys about this morning, is about yokes. That's not Y-O-L-K, the yolk that we had at breakfast this morning. It's the Y-O-K-E, the yoke that oxen stand under as they do their work. And so for us, we are not an agricultural community particularly. And so we may have never, as a matter of fact, as far as I'm aware, I don't know that I've ever actually seen a real yoke in action. But of course, I've seen pictures and I've heard the Bible stories and things like that. But a yoke, of course, is, for those of us that aren't familiar, it's like a big wooden sort of bar that goes over two oxes, whatever they are. And it keeps them together, and it keeps them moving together and working together and pointed in the same direction. And so in Jesus's day, people saw yokes all the time. They saw beasts of burden, animals under yokes all the time. And so what Jesus wanted to teach us is that we are all under a yoke. Every single one of us is under a yoke of something. We are hooked to, and linked up with something. And maybe several somethings in life. And so because there's not a single person that is completely unencumbered, completely free of a yoke or a burden that they carry. And so some of us might be under a yoke of slavery. The Bible talks about being under a yoke of slavery. And what God was talking about there is every time we step out from underneath his yoke, we enter into the yoke of slavery. And it could be, we could be enslaved to our own desire for independence, our own desires, just the things that we hunger for and lust after. We could be enslaved to or yoked to addictive behavior, or unfruitful thinking, or bad relationships. We could be yoked to pursuit of money or fame or things like that. But whenever we step out from underneath the yoke of Jesus, we step right under a yoke of slavery, is the way that the Bible describes it. We are not yoke free. And so some of us are feeling that way right now. We feel that we are just stuck. If you've ever felt stuck, that means you're under a yoke of something. You're burdened by something. You're linked to it, and you can't get out from underneath it, whether it's discouraging thoughts, or hopelessness, or depression, or sickness. You could be under like I said, a yoke of some sort of a sin issue, or you could be pursuing things that are no good for you. So that's one yoke that that a lot of us might be under. Another yoke is the yoke of sort of the worldly mindset, right? The spirit of the age is the way that the Bible talks it. And so the world has its own set of values, its own wisdom that that the world is pushing on us. And never have we been so burdened by the spirit of the age. Never have we been so burdened by what the world is selling us, because we get hammered with it constantly through media and through just a million venues. Everywhere we look, we're hearing and receiving the messages of the world. And so it's telling us like how to think, how to behave, what to do, what to pursue, what to chase after. The world wants to tell us what is good and what is bad, and so the world is constantly trying to push us into its own sense of morality, its own sense of what is right and wrong, its own sense of what is success and what is valuable. And we are constantly being bombarded by this. And the world is kind of yoking us up with it all the time. And so that's why the Bible calls it actually the spirit of the age. Like from a spiritual standpoint, the reality is that there is a literal spirit of the age, that there is a literal, Bible, Paul talked about how there's a spiritual battle, and there are powers and there are principalities and demons that we are fighting against, right? The powers of the enemy. And so when Paul talks about principalities, he's actually talking about incredibly powerful demons that are in charge of whole areas in the world, municipalities and countries and things like that. And so there is a spirit of the age. And when we step out from underneath God's yoke, we step under that spirit of the age. Another yoke that we could kind of step into, and a lot of us have done this in our past, hopefully not anymore, when it's like, is we could be under a yoke of religion, right? And a yoke of religion is whenever we have replaced loving relationship with God with, seeing God as cruel or uncaring or as like a hard taskmaster. And the yoke of religion makes our connection with God one of a master and a slave, a cruel master and a slave. A yoke of religion makes our faith transactional, because we're constantly forced to have to please God so that we can be okay with him, and so that we can be okay with ourselves. And so it really makes our faith a chore, because we can never please the master enough, right? And so we're constantly chasing down that feeling that we've done enough, and we never can do enough. And so many of us have been really, really wounded by religion, because religion crushes us. It's kind of a shame-based way of thinking, a shame-based way of doing. And one of the problems with this yoke of religion, where God can never be pleased, where we're constantly trying to earn our way, is that it actually makes us competitive with people, right? Because there is a tiny little slice of the pie of God's approval, and if God is very difficult to please, then I have to fight to get his approval. And whenever anybody else gets his approval, that means that there's less for me. And so religion is just a dastardly, terrible yoke and burden for us to be under. But I know many of us have grown up in streams where that's exactly the way that we understood God. And I think a lot of the world misunderstands God, and they think that they have to come under a yoke of religion. And I hope that sort of ends sometime soon, that people can start seeing God for who he really is. And then finally, last of all, I want to talk about the yoke of Jesus, the one that he talks about. And so in Matthew chapter 11, starting in verse 28 and going through 30, you have to just understand the context. Again, Jesus was constantly with these crowds of people, and he was seeing the burdens that they were carrying. He was seeing the yokes that they were under. He was seeing how difficult and painful their lives were, how hopeless they were feeling, how they had no means and no help and no peace and no hope. And so Jesus shared something about his kingdom in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30, like I said. And he says this, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I love this. "Come to me, all you who are weary, who are tired, who are burdened, who are carrying heavy loads, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke," there it is, "my yoke upon you, and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Let me read that again. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And so Jesus is saying to us that coming under him, taking his yoke on our shoulders, is actually the very thing that will set us free from all of those other heavy burdens that we've been carrying for so long, those yokes of religion, those yokes of self-interest, those yokes of the spirit of the age and things like that, those heavy burdens that we've carried. He said, my yoke will set you free from all of those harsh burdens that we've carried that have been crushing us for so long. And this may be, for me, one of the most tender passages in all of the scripture. And it is certainly one of the most tender, wonderful invitations that anyone has ever given, because the way that he begins, he first tries to kind of coax us out of our shell. So many of us have been so wounded by living independent of him. So many of us have been so wounded by living under the yoke of the spirit of the age, or under the yoke of religion, or under the yoke of sin and slavery. And so he tries to kind of coax us out of our addiction and out from underneath those heavy burdens by saying, I want you to know that I'm safe. If you come to me, you're going to discover that I'm gentle, that I'm humble in heart, that you can trust me with your life, because we've only ever come under the yokes that we have because we want the best life for ourselves that we can. And we've somehow believed that those yokes would lead to life, even though they won't. And Jesus said, no, those will never lead to life. They will crush you. But he says, come to me and you're going to discover that I'm humble in heart, that I'm gentle with you, that I can be trusted. And it actually reminds me of in Isaiah, where it says that a bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. In other words, no matter how bruised we may be, no matter how tiny our flame may be, even if it's flickering and it's almost like about to go out, Jesus said, if you come to me, I'll care for you. I'll protect you. I'll start to stoke that flame of your life that you really want to see burn. And so finally, he says this. He says that my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And the reason why the yoke of Jesus is light, and why that burden is light, why it's so easy for us, is because only in Christ do we have help carrying the burden. You know, in every other burden, in that yoke of religion, in that yoke of the spirit of the age, in that yoke of slavery, we carry the burden all by ourselves. But with Jesus, he carries the burden. With Jesus, he carries the heavy load himself. He says, link up with me and let me do the heavy lifting for you. Every other yoke is cruel. Every other yoke is heavy, but not Jesus's yoke. He is gentle and humble in heart, and he will do the heavy lifting for us himself if we will link up with him. And so what does this mean? Well, it means this. It means that we must link up to Jesus himself, that we put that bar, that wooden bar on our shoulders, and we hook ourselves up to Christ, right? And what we're saying is I am attaching my life to yours. In other words, where you go, Jesus, I will go. Whatever it is that you say, I will say. What you want is what I want. What you love, Jesus, is what I will love. What you hate is what I will hate. What you say is what I'll say. What is wise to you will become wisdom to me. What is foolish to you, I will see as foolishness. My life is yours. That's what we're agreeing to. Jesus said the only way to have freedom, the only way to have peace, the only way to have joy, the only way to have fullness of life is to link up to him and to say, you take the lead. I am attached to you. Where you go, I will go. What you say, I will say. What you value, I will value. What is wise to you will become wisdom to you. And so, to me. And so, what happens is that we'll be walking through life, and because we've dedicated ourselves, committed ourselves to coming under the yoke of Jesus, what will happen is that Jesus will be walking along, and Jesus will be moving towards something, and Jesus will say, no, 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 don't go that way. We're going to go this way. We're going to avoid that thing because there is no life in that area for you. There's nothing good for you in that place. And so instead of moving towards that thing that will hurt us, towards that thing that will enslave us, we follow Jesus and we allow him to take the lead, and we avoid that thing. Sometimes Jesus will lead us towards something that we wouldn't naturally have gone towards a person that we wouldn't naturally approach, towards a situation where we have to pour ourselves out. But Jesus is leading us into that situation. And because we've come under his yoke, we follow him and we agree with him and we obey him in that moment. You see, taking on the yoke of Jesus means following him every moment of our day and doing what he's doing and saying what he's saying and believing what he's teaching us, right? He wants to teach us this stuff. But in that life, that way of following Jesus so closely that where he goes, we will go, in our thinking, in our doing, in our decisions with our money and our time and our relationships and everything else, when we do that, this is the only place where we will find rest. That's the promise of Jesus, that in this place, we will finally find peace, in the place of coming under his burden, his yoke that is so restful, so light, so life-giving to us. We will finally find rest for our souls. And that's the very thing that we've been longing for all along. So I hope that this is helpful to you guys. I would encourage you to meditate on the scripture. I would encourage you to just examine what are the yokes that you've come under over these last 6-8 months, over the last 20 years, whatever it's been. Just figure out what yoke have you come under, and then get out from underneath those things by coming under the yoke of Jesus. And he will give you his light burden that will take off those other burdens, and he will finally give you peace, and he will finally give you rest. Okay, that's it. Have a great day. God bless you guys. Be blessed under the yoke of Jesus. It's the only good one, the only one that's good for you. And we will see you guys tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Thanks.